Yeah, I don't think I need any more proof, but that proves that I'm old. That was I was inducted into the Grand Guard Society, which means I graduated 50 years ago. So anyway, I called them up and I said, "Why are you inducting me into the Grand Guard Society?" And they said, "Well, if you graduated 50 years ago, and if you're able to show up, we'll induct you." So anyway, I came. A good friend of mine was chairman of the Grand Guard Society this year, the 50th reunion, and of course our real claim to fame is that Steve Spurrier was the quarterback all the time we were here. So I think he graduated with me, but then I heard later that no, he got a big bonus to go to the San Francisco 49ers, so he came back later and graduated. But anyway, that's what you get if you hang around 50 years and are vertical. Yeah. Anyway, so that was it, and then one thing I wanted to talk about, because this is the Ring series of lectures, and a lot of people don't know Dr. Ring, didn't know Dr. Ring, and he happened to be the head of the department when I was here, and he taught 2 semesters of appraisal, and he definitely made you learn it, let's say. And back then, before computers, if we showed up at class without this huge book of financial tables, he would send you back to wherever you came from to go get it and bring it with you. So anyway, but Ring was an interesting guy, and some of the things I knew, some of the things I looked up. But anyway, he became a professor here in 1947 after getting a bachelor's, a master's, and a PhD from New York University. Because I remember he used to talk about riding the subway to and from class. And there was one of the things that was really interesting, I thought, was the fact that he came from Germany at the age of 19. He had $100 in his pocket and no knowledge of English. And so he wound up being a professor here in 1947. I believe the real estate department, he helped get that started in 1952, somewhere around there. And so he was, we had good professors. One thing that he did was he and one of the professors, Dr. Clay Curtis, they actually wrote and tested the real estate brokers in the state of Florida. And then I think in 1970 they decided that they needed to have a course for the salespeople in real estate, so they started a sales course. And so they did all of the writing of the tests and the courses for the whole real estate industry for quite a while. And one of the things that was real interesting too, I thought when I was looking it up, I had no idea, but he, over the period of time, he wrote all the textbooks. He and I think he had maybe Dr. Clay Curtis, some of the other professors helped him with that, but he wrote textbooks, and he sold a total of 10 million copies. And they were all over the United States. They were used to teach real estate appraising and the basics of real estate. So he was pretty interesting. He lived to 101 years old, and he gave, I think he wound up giving millions of dollars to the school. And he started the Ring Tennis Training Center. He donated the money to build the tennis courts over at there's another indoor tennis center now, a training center, but he started the original one. And anyway, like I say, I graduated from his department in 1967, and he says that, because of his expert testimony and and all he was able to earn millions of dollars as an appraiser and a professor. But what I really think was what he told us one time. He said, you know, he bought up quite a bit of land in northwest Gainesville, and he told us, he says, you know, he says, I never made any money until I started taking my own advice. And so he was consulting with everybody else, and finally decided that he should buy some properties that he was interested in, instead of just telling people where to buy. But you know, from a personal standpoint, he gave me the incentive to pursue appraising, and then when I graduated, he actually helped locate me back in my hometown of Orlando, and he got me with, at that point, the largest appraisal firm, or at least one of them, in Orlando. There was 3 MAI appraisers and 1 associate, and then I was the second associate, and we had 1 word processor, so we had 1 secretary. And so that was kind of the start of all of it. He kept us very familiar with the income approach. We had to do a demonstration appraisal report. We actually used a residence, but in order for us to learn the income approach, we did it to the Appraisal Institute specs, but we also had to put in a net income approach in the residential appraisal and explain why that approach gave a much lower value than people were paying for houses at the time. So anyway, it was he got us introduced to appraising, and he actually was kind of criticized by the real estate industry at one time because he put too much emphasis on appraising. But he felt like appraising, if you learn the basics, then you can use that in any part of the business. And that's kind of been true with the people that have worked with us, because they have gone on to be successful developers, bankers, and also brokers. So that was his argument for putting emphasis on appraisal, and partly because he was a PhD, but he was also an MAI appraiser, and he worked and practiced appraising around the state of Florida. But anyway, I just thought it was kind of interesting. In fact, since it is the Ring series, that we maybe know a little bit more about Dr. Ring. But if you Google Dr. Alfred A. Ring, you get quite a bit of information, and you know, it's interesting to see where this part of the university came from. And of course, Dr. Ling and Dr. Archer have taken it to much higher heights, let's say, over the years.
Not sold 10 million textbooks.
Well, yeah, I don't know. Let's say Ring got there at the time when that was that was happening. I don't know. I think the state of Florida sold them for him, a lot of them, yeah. But anyway, that was the number that was in the statistics, anyway. But anyway, but one of the things that Dr. Archer mentioned that he thought might be interesting to y'all is I got out of this school, went right into the appraisal business, and like I say, it was a 6-person firm. And one of the things he thought might be interesting is kind of some of the reasons that we were able to grow that firm from 6 people to, by the mid-90s, we had 220 employees. And you know, it was the largest firm in Florida, and then we found out later it was probably the largest independent firm in the country. And so then we were we had 7 locations in the state of Florida. We had, I think in Orlando, we had 85 people, including our accounting department. And then in Tampa, we had, I think the largest firm there, we had at that point, we had like 45 people. So it was, it was a good sized firm, and obviously I didn't do it all. I had 4 great partners, And then in each location, in each major location, like West Palm and Tampa and all, we had partners there, managers/partners in those locations. And most of them, or a lot of them, are still in the business. A lot of them are doing probably more profitable things. So anyway, one of the things that we found out, some of it we found out by accident, and then we kind of got confirmed later about, well, one of the things was that you have to have an organization that's attractive to what Peter Drucker called the knowledge worker. In other words, if you're a knowledge worker, you can work anywhere. Well, like attorneys these days, you know, they can take a computer and work out of their garage if they really wanted to, but they want to be part of an organization where there's some synergy and all. And we were able to create that, and we had some really good people that came out of this university as well as other places. They came from, frankly, we hired people from several different parts of the country and parts of the state of Florida that came to work for us. And one of the reasons we could create that kind of an organization, I think, is we always had a very large variety of assignments. We were able to do a very large variety of property types of appraisal. We had, at one time, we had 14 people doing nothing but eminent domain and litigation. And so those kinds of things attracted a lot of different people that had different interests. And we, you know, for example, this is one of my personal examples. I get out of college, and within a couple months, I'm doing an appraisal of a proposed automobile racetrack. So, you know, and I love automobiles. So I was traveling all over the state interviewing automobile racetrack operators. So, you know, those kind of things. And we always had a variety of appraisals, and we had some large jobs that we did. And we got, early on, we got into market studies. We had a partner that we brought in that had a lot of knowledge of market studies. So we were doing market studies for condo conversions and all. And then she left and started a big real estate brokerage firm, and then she became president of the Orlando Board of Realtors. But we got that started, and it makes obviously the job a lot more interesting, and you use that same information when you're doing appraisals to find, you know, you're trying to find out if you're getting the highest and best use for the property, and especially in condo conversions. There was a lot of conversions made before the crash, and a lot of them converted back to apartments, to rental apartments. But the market studies, we went so far as to go around and make personal interviews door to door, and sometimes, you know, to find out if the apartment dwellers, you know, were potential buyers. So we did that early on. That was probably in the early 70s, and but we had that, and then, like I say, one of the things we did in the 70s, we were, well, I guess you might say we were on the bleeding edge of computers, and we started in 1977, and one of the reasons we were able to start that, we hired a person who later became a partner. Now he's a partner in a different firm, but he had a degree in computer sciences, but he had a master's from the University of Florida in real estate. And so he helped us become one of the first firms to use computers, and I'll never forget that the first PC, he actually assembled it in like 77 or 78, and I think we thought it was really a good price at $15,000. Yeah. It wasn't too long that we were buying trash 80s for like $1,500, but we were, like I say, we were kind of on the bleeding edge, and we started using multiple linear regression and some things that worked for certain property types when you had enough information. And we were doing some things early on that, like I say, we were kind of on the bleeding edge of computers, but it was great. And the main thing it got attention. It brought attention to our firm, and then we were able to attract, the best and brightest from U of F and other places. And then, you have to have an organization that's attractive for people to come to work for you. But then the second thing that happened to us was we were fortunate. We had a fortunate breakthrough, you might say. In 1975, when we were in the Orlando area, at least, we were in a deep recession. I mean, I think we were overbuilt in everything except libraries, and then they built the biggest library in the Southeast, But we were just overbuilt and everything. It was bad times. It was beginning to be bad times, and most of the appraisal firms were shrinking, and we had, I'm trying to think of the number of people we had at that time. We probably had 10, 12 people at that point in time. So we didn't want to shrink, so we went after actually one of the largest jobs we ever had. We landed a job with the state of Florida to do an inventory and rental valuations of all the housing that every department in the state of Florida had. I think there was 26 departments, and we visited forest towers, state parks, all the universities. We even put a rental valuation on the president of the University of Florida's house, which we didn't have many comps for that, but we found some interesting things. We found several hundred units that the state owned, but they didn't know they owned. So that was one of the reasons the Department of Administration, which all the other departments called Dead on Arrival, DOA. But anyway, we found that many more units. We found, actually, I don't think anybody is still involved, but we found some at the University of Florida where a professor of art had several art students had their own apartments, and the state didn't know they had them. But anyway, there were some interesting things that we found all around the state. At the prisons, we visited every prison in the state and all that. So anyway, what that did for us, that really got us we got a feel for working the whole state of Florida, because we were in every, all 67 counties. So we made contacts with real estate professionals in every part of the state. And rural, you name it. We were in those parts of the states looking at residential properties primarily, but we were able to make contacts with all those people, and so that was just fortunate. I kind of made a note here: the harder you work, the luckier you get. But we really worked at getting that job, and we actually had. There was some politics involved, and so luckily I was. Another thing that you want to do, in any business, is networking. Well, I was networking quite a bit with, we had the largest business network group in Orlando. I was in that network. Well, one of the more powerful state legislators was in my group, and when they found out that they were trying through politics to take the job away from us, he kept an eye on it for us. So anyway, that's why a lot of times network groups, you don't know how important they're going to be until you need somebody, let's say, and any part of business. So that was helpful. And the other And it wasn't that we deserved the job. It just turned out that another appraisal firm had written the specs for the job, and so they kind of had the inside track. But we actually had the personnel and all to do the job. Get this, tell you how far back this was. This was 1975. The way that the Department of Administration picked the firms that they wanted to bid on the job, they went to the Yellow Pages to see who had the biggest firms in each city. And luckily, we had decided that the Yellow Pages, we had to be there. A lot of people put ads in. We never put ads in. We would see how much column space that we could get by putting all of our associates in. And they said, oh, that's one of the largest firms in Florida. Well, it was, but you know, we weren't really that big. But they said, okay, they wanted us. We were like one of 5 firms that bid on it. So anyway, we bid on the job, and it turned out to be probably, in real dollars, one of the top jobs that we ever had, because we were all over the state with. I think we kept 8 people busy for 6 months or so, and they even gave me an office in Tallahassee, which, you know, right next to the lieutenant governor or something. I can't remember who he was at the time, but I only used it once. I was too busy traveling around the state. But anyway, it was an interesting job. So we were fortunate there. I think another reason that we grew, and I think anybody can grow, is that we continued our involvement with the University of Florida. And I have a slide on there somewhere that it's kind of just, it's more interesting to me than anybody probably, but it's I won the Gorton Award, by the way, which that was for the best appraisal in 1966, okay, for the school, okay. The Gorton Award, I got that, and I think that semester, Dr. Ring gave me a B. And I'm like, yeah, really? Anyway, but he was tough, let's say. But anyway, it was an interesting experience. And then the next slide is there. This is something that when Dr. Ring got ready to retire, he thought he wanted to get a lot of real estate people involved in the state of Florida. So he wanted to make a statement, because we were getting a new president of the university, and I'm having a hard time remembering his name. Might have been, was there a Lancelotti? Was there somebody? Anyway,
It was the dean of business school.
that was it, Dean of Business School. Well, he thought that he was going to do too much economizing. So we got together, I forget how many people in the state of Florida, real estate people of all brokerage, development, whatever. And I happened to be one of the charter members, 1969. So we've stayed involved pretty much since then. And we have had a number of people that we hired from here. One of the things that made us grow, I mentioned one of them already, 1977 and 1978. Each one of those years, we hired a master's degree graduate from the University of Florida Real Estate School. So, and one of them happened to have a computer science degree, and one of them now has one of the largest appraisal firms in Orlando, and his family very much into real estate in Orlando. But then in 1983 and 84, we kind of got cranking, because we opened up some branch offices, and we actually hired one of the first people we hired, and probably very much maybe one of the first women commercial appraisers in the state. And she's a superstar, and you've seen her quite a bit on the advisory board, Angie Brown. So Angie worked for us for several years, and then went to work for a bank, and then started her own firm. Anyway, so Angie came to work for us, and then next year, I don't know if Angie's told this much, but Angie was a cheerleader at the University of Florida, And the next year, we had another real estate major that we hired. She was also a cheerleader at the University of Florida. Her dad was a very prominent attorney here in Gainesville. And both of them became MAI appraisers. And of course, Angie is, you know, she's done well. And actually, I'd recommend, you know, she's one of my friendly competitors, but I would recommend that you pull the video up from the Ring series for 2015, and she gives you some real good information about appraising and things that kind of, you know, probably better than I do. But anyway, she's done a great job, and she's really worked well. You know, she worked well in the business, and she helped us grow a lot. She was very much a participant in where we did semi-annual reviews of all of our appraisers, and she helped get that started, and it really makes a difference when people think that you're paying attention to them. And you know, it's, you know, sometimes even if it's a bad review, they have a chance to get better, but they also know that you care about them. So it's good, and we had that going for us for a long time. We still do it, but we're much smaller now. But so, and then the 1890s, that's it, yeah, yeah. 1980s and 1990s, we hired a lot more of the Florida graduates, and we, you know, we had good relations with all the real estate department, with Hal Smith, and he, you know, he would recommend that they come and take a look at us, and Dr. Archer, and also we stayed in touch with the real estate department here. And then another thing that, of course, we found out that if you stay in one city, there's only a certain amount of demand. I mean, for your services, if you want to keep us. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, sometimes it's good to stay where you're from, so to speak. But we started opening branch offices in 1983, and we opened up West Palm Beach, which led to having 2 branches from that office, which were Stewart and Fort Lauderdale. And then we, in 1984, we started the Tampa branch and had offices in Sarasota and Newport Richey. In the 1990s, we did Jacksonville, Brevard County, and Volusia County. And one of the reasons, you know, it was important for us to have those extra offices because we did probably, except for the Orlando office, the other offices did 50% of their business in single-family residential appraisals. And those appraisals, you know, you pretty much have to be local to do those, as they found out after 2008 when the appraisal management companies started sending people from other parts of the state, you know, into, say, Orlando or somewhere else. They'd be coming from Brevard County or sometimes Tampa to do appraisals, and sometimes you wondered if they found the right property. But it got really bad for a little while, and then they got that straightened out. But it was pretty bad after the 2008 crash. And then in the mid-90s, we actually had 2 appraisal management offices that we offered single-family appraisals throughout the state of Florida, and we had professional associates working for us in other cities and around the state that we had screened and all. So that helped us grow, but we didn't count the independent contractors weren't part of our employees. But by the mid-90s, we had over 200 employees, which was large. But we had a lot of good partners. We had at least 2 partners in each main office, and so they helped us grow the company and help keep everything of good quality. And we pride ourselves on that. Everybody tried to use the same type of format, and a lot of that format, when after sold the company, but that took place in the late 90s. They actually, the company that bought us used our format for most of their commercial appraisals. But, and then we had, like I mentioned before, another thing that makes your business grow is a diversity in hiring and bringing people in. And like I say, I know we had the first, in the Orlando area, we had the first women appraisers in residential and commercial. And we had, you know, and we had the minorities were getting into the business. We had minorities working with us. And we even went so far as to hire quite a few FSU graduates. So we did have a diversity, yeah. And we had a good relationship with the real estate department up there. And so at one time, I remember in the Orlando office, we might have been about equal, Florida and Florida State. So you can imagine what went on in the latter part of November in our office, you know. The PA system was being used for a lot more than just telling people they had a phone call. It was interesting. We had a lot of fun with it. So and we had people actually right now with the company that we helped start. The West Palm Beach manager of the Valbridge company he also was our manager in West Palm back in the 90s, and he was a Florida State graduate, you know, in real estate. So like I say, we had a lot of people working for us, which really helped grow the company. Then, you know, the one thing that I think everybody wants to do, no matter what part of the real estate business they're in, they want to stay connected with the people, the professionals that are at least in their segment of the real estate business. We've always stayed involved with the Appraisal Institute, which way back before 1990 was the American Institute of Real Estate Appraisers. They merged with the Society of Real Estate Appraisers. Those were the two biggest groups in the country, and they became the Appraisal Institute. So that group has always been, we've always been connected with that group, and we had, well, the company that we have now, and I'll show you some quick slides on it, but it's the company we have now, Valbridge. We have over 200 MAIs around the country in 70 offices. So that, you know, so what we've done in that company, and most appraisal groups, they want the people to get their designations and stay connected with the Appraisal Institute at some point in their careers. So. Oh yeah, that's right. Well, most of the time, we get half our mail MIA, you know, and we feel like that sometimes, yeah. But no, MAI is really what we've always said is member of the Appraisal Institute. You know, it's they say that it may not even have a definition, you know, but it's a member of the Appraisal Institute. And we used to get confused a lot with, you know, the architect AIAs, so they called us the MIAs. So but anyway, it's MAI is a member of the Appraisal Institute, and then the residential member, which I got my kind of got some stripes doing that when I first got into business. We appraised anything that came through the door. So we did residential, we did litigation, we did commercial, we did everything. So residential, the designation that at the time that most people recognized was the Senior Residential Appraiser, which was part of the Society of Real Estate Appraisers. The American Institute of Real Estate Appraisers got started during the Depression because nobody had any way of standardization of appraising property. So the banks got, along with other users of valuations, they got the MAI started, the American Institute of Real Estate Appraisers. And my understanding was that the Savings and Loan got the Senior Residential Appraiser designation started. And then as both groups grew, they actually went to all types of properties. And so then in 1990, they had a merger, and that's when certification came about 1990. And so then that certification, it's gotten more difficult every year, but most of the lenders and all, even though if it's a federal transaction, they can't say, well, we have to have an MAI. So they're regulated out of that. Is that true or not?
Could you explain, when you say certified, could you explain, I think you mean state certified?
State certified, yes, I'm sorry, yeah. State certified appraisers, you have the general certification and you have residential certification. And general certification has gotten more difficult every year almost, and so it's really, people really have to study, have to have a lot of education to get that at this point. At one time, the MAI was the thing that most commercial lenders looked at. They still look at that. They're allowed to include that in their point system for putting appraisers on their approved panel, but they can't say, oh, it has to be an MAI, but they look at the overall credentials of the person. So that's how that's a part of a federal regulation. Insurance companies and some other people still say, well, it has to be an MAI, but but it has changed over the years because of certification. And so you'll see that, and a lot of times, the certified residential appraisers, a lot of those people will also be SRAs, which is senior residential appraiser, because when they merged, they kept the MAI designation and the SRA designation. So you probably see that when you're looking at appraisals or wanting to hire some appraisers. But that's good. And of course, you want to stay, if you're in any type of real estate, you probably want to stay connected with the realtors. And at your level, you probably want to stay connected with the CCIMs, which I don't know the exact definition of a CCIM, but they are the premier commercial brokers, generally speaking. And they have good courses. They have courses similar to what the Appraisal Institute has, and in some ways they're better because they give you a look, a more practical look. You're looking at more from buyers and sellers that are out there in the market, more so maybe than some of the institute courses. But they have and then they'll go on and give you you can use some of their analyses to just to look at what the return is after taxes, not just before taxes, but so you get a good handle. They have anybody teach those here, the CCIM courses?
Well, we don't actually.
But you do the same thing. Yeah. So they're good courses though, and actually the Appraisal Institute recognizes the CCIM courses as continuing education, and some courses they don't recognize. They recognize those, and then there's something that I had an experience with, and a lot of our people went through leadership programs in the cities that they were in, like Leadership Tampa, Leadership Orlando, and all. The Chamber of Commerce, the bigger Chamber of Commerce, they generally offer those leadership programs, and then there's a national leadership organization, so you can get exposed nationwide as well as find out about your local community, get connected with most of the people you want to be connected with in any particular city. And an example of that is one of our, the person that was running our Tampa office, she was a member of Leadership Orlando. Well, she went to Tampa and she became a member of Leadership Tampa. And when we got ready to build a building in Tampa, her connections through the leadership program, we were able to buy a site near West Shore and build a building back in the late 80s. And so she had those connections that that she wouldn't have had otherwise. So, you know, that's just one of the things. You know, any of these network type groups, you can, you know, you have to look at each one individually, but it's, they're generally really good for growing your business or your career. So the leadership programs have turned out to be very good. There's probably a leadership Gainesville, I'm not sure, but the Chamber of Commerce would know. Yeah, but it's, but anyway, that's one of the things that, and of course, my prediction is, and I think it's a lot of people's predictions, is we're not getting many people to come in the appraisal business. And you know, there's probably a reason for that, because you can probably make more money doing something else, and unless you grow into a large firm or something. But the one thing that we're finding is the MAIs they're not getting enough MAIs to replace the ones that are retiring and dying. And I'm still hanging in there, so, you know, but there's a lot of people said, you know, we're going to retire, and I just, I can only play so much tennis. So, you know, I've decided that I'm not going to retire till they make me. And anyway, also the certification, people becoming certified appraisers, that has, particularly after 2008, that dropped way off. And so we don't see enough people going into that, even becoming certified, to, you know, replenish the supply of appraisers. So there's a good possibility, and like one of the fellows, MAIs, that works with me now, he just brought his daughter into the business because he says, you know, he says, the demand should be greater, and the supply of appraisers are just not going to be there. And that you're going to see the, you know, the financial institutions and the regulations, particularly if they ever get some of the regulations off the community banks, you're going to see a lot more demand for appraisers, I think, and hopefully that supply and demand thing still works, and we should see a better.
Talk a little bit more about demand. I mean, explain why banks hire you and who else demand.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah. Banks hire us is generally to get an idea of what they, you know, they have a certain loan to value ratio that they want to arrive at, and so they want to get an idea of what the valuation is. And so we do the valuation, and there's some pretty strict regulations on that. Most of them have been, when people became certified, they've been taken from the larger appraisal groups like the Appraisal Institute and all. So we do appraisals on all types of properties for banks. We don't, you know, there's people in our business that do business appraisals in addition to real estate appraisals. We have pretty much concentrated on just real estate appraisal. So we do single family homes for mortgage companies and banks that make single family loans, and we also do all types of commercial properties. Is that, you know, that's the demand, and the demand has started to increase because we're seeing the banks, we're seeing people putting a lot, coming out of the ground with a lot more buildings and all. Now some of those properties, you know, sometimes we don't see the appraisal. Sometimes they have the people loaning the money have their own people analyzing the values and all. But we do see we do see some portfolios that we look at on a regular basis, and that's to see what their valuations are sometimes for the stock market. They want to see what the valuations are of the portfolios. But a lot of the money these days we're seeing come from, well, you know, there's a lot of cash, but the cash sometimes is coming from the stock market and various places to buy real estate. So sometimes we don't see those types of appraisals, but we do see we're still seeing a lot from the banks. And like I say, the smaller community banks, which is has been kind of our bread and butter over the years, they have been restricted considerably, so we're seeing them bumping up against their loan limits and all. But I think we're going to see some reduction of restrictions, and we'll see them getting into the market a little more.
Any other demand for fee appraisal, and what about
Oh.
non-fee appraisals, market analysis?
Market analysis.
What's your mix of clients, customers?
Yeah, it's mainly appraisal clients, but we do quite, we'll do quite a bit of eminent domain in some of the offices. The West Palm office is doing a lot of eminent domain. We did a lot of litigation during the period of the foreclosure period. There was properties that the banks needed to get an idea. Like, for instance, when one large bank in Florida went under, another large bank took over all their assets, so they needed to see what they had. And so we did. That's another demand when they have foreclosures. That thank goodness, that part of the business has slowed down. We don't see much of that right now, but every now and then we still see some of that.
You mentioned eminent domain a couple times. Could you give us an example of?
Okay, like they want to widen 13th Street. Well, hopefully they don't, but anyway, but let's say they do, and they want to take 10 feet on each side. So we do an appraisal of what that 10 feet is worth, and under Florida law, it's the part taken as the part of the whole plus severance damages. In the federal courts, state of Florida, that's my interpretation anyway. And the federal courts, they say that if there's any spatial benefits, then you get to subtract that from the severance damages. So, but they don't in the state law. It's if there's severance damages, which means if you're getting too close to a building, or if you're, let's say you had a service station site, like the one that was over here on the corner, which when I was here, they tore down the SAE house and built an Amoco service station at the corner of 13th and University. That's been a while, yeah. But anyway, so then when they widened the intersection, you don't have a usable service station site anymore. Let's say they need, well, now you need bigger sites because they require water retention, storm drainage and storm retention. But let's say that they don't. Let's say they were using an acre, approximately 200 by 200, and they come along and all they've got left is 100 feet. So it's not usable as a service station anymore. And that service station site, let's say, was bringing, at the time, probably twice as much as a regular commercial piece property on a square foot basis. So when they did that, they changed the highest and best use, and so there's definite what you would call severance damages. So you're taking it at the value per square foot, but then they also have damaged the remainder. So that's part of the appraisal process when you're doing eminent domain. And each state has a little different law, I understand. If the federal government's taking it, then there's another law. So it's a little different than just coming up with market value, although that's where you start, the market value of the property. And a lot of times you do what they call a before and after. You do the property before the right-of-way is taken, and you do it after, and of course the difference is what they should be paid for the right-of-way taking. But when I first got out of college, luckily I went to work with somebody that we were doing most of the Department of Transportation work in Central Florida. So, they threw me right in there. It was kind of like throwing me in the wolf's den or something with all the people, with all the attorneys and everybody. And you had to make sure that you did all of the research and your verifications on the sales of properties and all. That when somebody gets you on the witness stand and starts asking you where you got your information, you probably better know. And sometimes it would happen that people had all the wrong information. So you would have obviously they're going to lose that case. So the appraisers don't normally lose the case. The attorneys lose it, but the appraisers they're not advocates, but they have to, once they come to a conclusion, they have to defend that.
So an appraiser would be working for the state, and an appraiser would be working for the property owner?
For the property owner, yeah. Yeah, we actually worked for both, not at the same time, of course, but we did a lot of work for the Department of Transportation, and then we did a lot of work actually for property owners also. And it was real interesting, and you had to do very, it was more complicated than regular appraisal work, and you had to make sure that you had all your facts very, very much in line, or, because you didn't want to, when I first got out of the business, my partner would, he later became my partner, he was my employer. He was going to court, and he was having to get, cross-examined on information that I had worked up for him, So it was a good thing that I was into details at that time. But yeah, that's litigation is a good. Oh, anybody? Yeah, I'm sorry.
I just had a question. When you guys bill, is it a set rate, or do you charge an hourly fee, percentage of property? How do you bill for your services?
Most of the time, it's a fee, a fixed fee, but we base that on the amount of time and the difficulty of the job. So we will. Most everything now, the banks have to bid things out now on commercial appraisals. So they may get 3 to 5 bids as to the amount of the fee and the amount of time. So we look at that and say, okay, that's one of those, let's say it's going to take 5 days. We figure it'll be 5 business days to do it. And then when, and of course generally speaking, today, the low bidder and the person that can do the quickest, they're going to get the job. And so we have to be careful of how we bid that. Now, when we're doing litigation work, there's usually a fixed fee to begin with, and then any preparation for trial, and then also, any testimony, all that's done on an hourly basis. Anybody else got any questions? Oh, yeah.
Being an appraiser who had gone through multiple downturns, like prior to even 2000, did you see the writing on the wall prior to 2008, and do you see it now?
Yeah, we actually did. There weren't too many people listening, but we actually did. In fact, starting in early 2007, we turned down every proposed subdivision appraisal that came by us. We said, no, it's, first of all, the absorption is going to be so long that you're not going to like the numbers. And secondly, we just, basically we realized the party was over. And we actually saw it a lot sooner for condominiums. I mean, we saw condominiums being sold in downtown Orlando for $400 a square foot. And I remember sitting around in 2006 and all, and we were talking to some investors and all, and we said, well, how low do you think it's going to go when the crash comes? So I know, me and one of my buddies, we said, 150 to 175 a square foot is where they're going to wind up, when the crash comes. Of course, my old-time partner, Bill Pardue, who had seen a lot more than I had seen, he says, nah, he says, $125 a square foot. Believe what happened? They auctioned a bunch of them for that or less. Yeah. but they were selling to people for $400 a square foot. I mean, and the people are saying, oh, we're buying these investments. And it was kind of like when Disney came to town, we would go out and look at land, and kind of the bigger fool theory. You buy it for $10,000 an acre, and you flip it for 20, and then the next guy, he flips it for 30, and it just keeps going. Well, somewhere it's going to stop. And so my partner, whose dad was heavily into the real estate business in the 1920s, he experienced that crash of the 1927 when everything just the bubble burst in Florida, California, places. He said his old joke was that he said his dad was, he said he couldn't sleep at night. He stayed awake all night just counting how many millions he was worth. And then sometime in 1927, he just went straight to sleep. Had no problem. But that's what happened. I mean, if you look at, and we had the same thing kind of coming, we could see it coming. I mean, we weren't totally, we made, let's say this, we made some mistakes, when we should have said, it's going to crash. Well, one of my competitors, and I think I mentioned her name here recently, but she was putting in her appraisals, having a residential put in her appraisals that the comparable sales reflect this value today, but basically she was saying, don't expect this to last. Well, the mortgage companies, they went crazy. Like, you can't put that in an appraisal, And so, but she was putting it in, they were putting it in an addendum, and we were verbally telling the people the same thing, but she was putting it in there, and I think what happened was she had an addendum, and the mortgage companies kept tearing the addendum off and throwing it away. But that's the thing about it, was people were making so much money. In fact, I knew one mortgage broker that said that they had not had to turn down an applicant for 3.5 years. Everything, Fannie Mae basically told people, just look the other way, just make a loan to everybody, And so Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac kind of, they helped the progress of this on. If you probably, is this making a, oh, but I kept hearing something. Yeah, anyway, that's okay. Anyway, I'm being recorded. Oh, don't, that's off the record. No, anyway, but if you really, I think most of y'all have seen the movie The Big Short. If you haven't, get it off Amazon or something. In fact, I bought it off Amazon, so every now and then I watch it just to remind me that, that these things can happen. It's a great movie. Anyway, but that's the people that saw it coming, nobody would believe them.
Do you see it coming now?
Huh?
Do you see it coming now?
Not, well, I can't look, about as far as I can look out is about 2 years, and I see us doing things, holding up 2 years. What I'm also seeing is the property values today they have much better foundation than they did, in the early 2000s. People aren't, I knew one person that bought 10 proposed houses, and they said they were going to live in each one of them. And they got mortgages on 10 proposed houses, and they figured that, that as soon as they got them, they would flip them because they were buying them, the values were going up. So what happened was, I think 5 of them got built soon enough that they flipped them, and the other 5, they wound up, so I don't know if they broke even or not, but anyway, but that's what was, that's kind of what was happening, and I got a kick out of one of the business writers in the Orlando Sentinel. He said he knew we were in trouble when his waiter down on Church Street Station told him that he had just bought 3 investment condos. So anyway, there was, there were some signs out there, but people were making so much money they just kept doing it, But anyway, I have some handouts. They didn't have a PowerPoint, or they probably had one, but they didn't send it to me. But I've got a bunch of brochures here from the Appraisal Institute if you want to take a look and see what it takes and how it may benefit you, or what they're about. And then I had a couple slides on here about, there it is. That's us. This is do I have to pay for advertising? No. Okay. Well, you can run through those pretty quick, and it's the same stuff. Huh?
You give me the nod
Just keep going, yeah. Okay, that's us. We have 70 locations around the country, and then it goes on next. Yeah, and that's kind of where we are, various places. Hopefully they got Orlando in there. But anyway, so we got Orlando and Tampa, West Palm, and Naples. Naples actually is where we have the person, the chairman of the whole Valbridge group. He and his wife both are MAIs, and they're real involved. The Armilovich, Jerry Armilovich and Rick Armilovich, yeah. So they're real involved. Okay, the rest of it is just, you know, all that stuff. That tells you what we do. We do appraisals, we do market studies, we do all that stuff. So anyway, but you know, our office was one of the offices that helped roll this whole thing out in 2013. We rolled it out in March of 2013. So, and we started, at that point we had, I think we had 42 offices or something like that. But we have like 200, I think there's like 200 designated appraisers, MAIs, in the company now, in the group. But each office is owned individually, and basically you could call it a franchise, however, you know, but each office is part owner of Valbridge, unlike some of the franchises where you have one owner or a group of owners, and then they sell off the franchises. But we actually are involved. So yeah, we do all that stuff, yeah. Okay, that's good. And they have some examples there with eminent domain easements, before and after valuations we were talking about. Mass transit, unfortunately I haven't had any opportunities to do mass transit. We bid on some, but it didn't happen. We have an MAI that was in Orlando. His brother's still an MAI in Orlando, and he specializes in that, and he works out of Chicago. And we can't get him to join Valbridge, but we'd like to. But pipelines, we have done rights of way where pipelines were involved, but not the whole pipeline. And but anyway, these are what some of the other offices have done. Okay, I don't know what. Yeah, so we do. That's all the stuff. Medical. We've always done a lot of medical office buildings, and MOBs, as the hospital people call them. We did a lot of work for HCA. We still do a lot of work for Florida Hospitals, which is now changing their name to Advent Health System, so because they have hospitals all over the country. So they're going to have one name. And anyway, I don't know what else there's in there, but that's typical what appraisers do. We try to appraise everything developers do. I don't know what's next. Yeah. We do a lot of industrial. Industrial's been the kind of the right now. They're a special property for most investors and developers. I think don't we have Steve McRaney on our advisory board? He's building the largest warehouse project, I think, in Orlando right now. And so we get involved in quite a bit of that. Self-storage, it came back, and has really been strong. It went down, and we had a couple people that worked for us that actually left and worked with a self-storage developer, developed a big part of it under the name SureGuard, and then they sold I think public warehousing, and then they bought some, so when the downturn came, they bought some and refurbished them and all. It's been in good investments for them. So I don't know. Do we have any more on there? Hospital. Oh gosh, yeah. We've done some hospitals in the past. The ones that they decided not to use anymore. And the last one we did, we went back later on, and it was a vacant parcel in Ormond Beach. And so they had a proposed condo project there. So we actually did the appraisal on the proposed condo project.
To replace the hospital?
Yeah, replace the hospital. Well, they built that huge hospital on I-95 out there at Ormond Beach, Florida Hospital. So they didn't, the other one they couldn't get rid of, they scraped it. So, yeah. So anyway, gosh, I didn't know they sent me that much stuff. Anyway, we do all that stuff, lodging and everything. That's us. Oh my. Yeah. Anyway, they've, you know, it's a good thing to have those connections, and you can get information. If we want to do something, any place in the country, I can get with somebody, and they can give me a fee estimate, you know, and work with them. What else is there? I think there may be one more. Yeah, we did that. Anyway, so that's what I got our marketing department to send that to me, and anyway, so that's about our appraising operation, and I hope that's got somebody interested, and even if you're not going into appraising, you know, feel free to contact me anytime. Contact the Appraisal Institute or whatever, and get some information if you need it.
Well, thank you.